what they do is they focus on what's wrong rather than what's right. And we call them seagull managers. They fly in, make a lot of noise, crap on everybody, and then fly out. You know, and they wonder why people are leaving and aren't really committed. And so no, it's how do you work with your people and not seagull in. And see, because what happens when you seagull in, then you get a bunch of ducks. We love to talk about that. They go quack quack. It's our job. Quack. And so you got seagulls running and ducks going, and the place is a noisy place, but it's not producing what you really want.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. I'm so glad you joined us. Hey, if you're new here, subscribe. Most of the people watching this have not subscribed. If you do, you'll get incredible access, premium access to top leaders like Ken Blanchard. He's going to be my guest on the podcast along with Randy Conley. Do you know he's one of the 25 best-selling authors in history of all time because he wrote a book called The 1 Minute Manager, and a lot of you are familiar with that. It sold over 23 million copies. That book alone has been translated into 47 languages. It's used around the world, and he's 85. And so we're going to talk about being fit, staying healthy, the 1 Minute Manager, seagull management, my favorite principles, and a whole lot more on this podcast. Plus, Randy is going to talk about trust. Well, hey, today's episode is brought to you by our partners at Compassion and GLOO. So when I was a pastor, I knew that child sponsorship was an opportunity for my church to really make an impact worldwide. So I went to Compassion and they made it happen. If you want to host your own Compassion Sunday, go to compassion.com/Carey and you can get signed up today. And then if you really want to cut through the noise, how do you actually connect with people? Well, are you texting? And if so, is your plan free? You want to take the pain out of communicating with your people? GLOO is offering free texting to churches. Check it out at gloo.us/free texting today. And now my conversation with Ken Blanchard and Randy Conley. Well, Ken and Randy, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be here with you, Carey.
Thanks, Carey.
Yeah, it's a thrill to have you. I would love to know how the two of you met and got working together, and then a little career retrospective for each of you.
Randy, why don't you tell about how you joined our company, because that's how we met.
Yeah. We met when I joined Ken's company in 1996. So this is my 28th year with the organization. And I started in our project management ranks, managing the implementation of our training and consulting projects. And one of my very first client projects was accompanying Ken on a talk that he was doing at American Honda up in Torrance, California. And we're based in San Diego. And I got to ride in a limousine with Ken Blanchard. I had only been at the company like a few months, and it's like, I flew under this lucky star, and I get to ride with Ken up to Los Angeles and back, and we just connected. Our faith was a common denominator for us, and we just had a great connection. And over that time, I have moved into different leadership roles at Blanchard. I was on our executive leadership team for a number of years, leading the delivery side of our business. And the last several years, I've been focusing on client work. My area of expertise is in building trust. And so Ken and I had talked for quite a long time about doing a book together. And one of the few good things that came out of COVID was we actually had the time to do it. So,
and it worked out perfectly because the book is, 52 ways to become a servant leader and build trust. And so 26 of them is about servant leadership, and those are mine that I kind of share, and then 26 on trust. And we put those together in first the initial book and now the playbook. So it's really been fun. In many ways, it really covers all the concepts that our company has been teaching over the years around the world.
And 52 being 52 weeks in the year, right?
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah.
One for each week.
Co-authorship is tough. I mean, a lot of people think about it. They have a hard time doing it. Ken, you've written 70 books, is it? Most of which were co-authored. What are some secrets to making a co-authorship work?
Well, I think first you got to decide what's the big topic that you want to talk about. And a lot of my co-authors, I would go even to them, like Norman Vincent Peale, who was a positive thinking guy, and Gary Ridge, who became president of WD-40, and different people like that. And I don't sit down and write. I've never been that kind. I always have a recording of some type and go and interview and have a discussion with the person. Then I have two great editors, Martha Lawrence and Renee Broadwell, and one of them will type it up, and then we'll look at it and see how we're going to organize it all. And I also like to write parables, and that's what I did with Spencer Johnson. Met Spencer at a cocktail party at Adelaide Bree, who wrote Visualizations, Directing the Movies of Your Mind, at a party for authors in San Diego. And I had written a textbook with Paul Hersey, and so I qualified for this party. And my wife, Margie, met Spencer first, and he was a children's book writer. He and his wife wrote all these kids' books, the Value Tales series, The Value of Courage, starring Jackie Robinson, The Value of Determination, the story of Helen Keller. And Margie hand carried him over to me and said, "You two guys ought to write a children's book for managers. They won't read anything else." And so I invited Spencer to a seminar I was doing the next day. He sat in the back and laughed, and he came running up and he said, "Forget parenting. Let's do the 1 minute manager." And that we decided to do a parable because I'm a storyteller and was a children's book writer. And so life is what happens to you when you're planning on doing something else, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I didn't know that. Okay, I got a bunch of questions about writing. What made you think that was a good idea to collaborate with a children's author?
Well, my wife really was the one that suggested it, because people won't read anything else. And too many of the management and leadership books were really long, extensive things. And I always thought we would be much better off if people had simpler stuff. My mission statement is to be a loving teacher, an example of simple truths that helps myself and others to awaken to the presence of God in our lives and realize that we're here to serve, not to be served. And so it's been kind of my mission statement. So it's kind of fit in. And the textbook really came out of meeting Paul Hersey when I was at Ohio University. I heard he taught a great leadership class. He came and taught as chairman of the management department. And the dean asked me to teach a course in his department. It was really kind of interesting. It's a side venture. My faculty in graduate school all said, if you want to be at a university, you should be administrating because you can't write. I read to learn, and maybe it was too simple and easy to understand for their style. So my first job was as assistant to the dean of the College of Business at Ohio University, and Hersey came as chairman of the management department. So my dean, Harry Evers, said, teach a course in there. And I hadn't thought about teaching before, because if you don't write, you perish as a faculty member, He said, I don't care anything about that, teach a course. So I started to teach, and after a couple of weeks, I told my wife, Margie, this is really fun, this is what I ought to be doing. She said, well, what about the writing? I said, I don't know, I'll figure something out. But I heard Hersey taught a great leadership course, and so I asked him if I could sit in his course the next semester. He said, nobody audits my course. You want to take it for credit, you're welcome. And he walked away, and I thought that was interesting because I had a PhD and he didn't. He wants me to take his course for credit. So I talked to Margie, and she said, is he any good? I said, he's supposed to be great. She said, well, get your ego out of the way and take his damn course. And so I had to talk the registrar into letting me in to take his course, and I did, and I wrote all the papers. And in June, I think 68, Hersey came into my office and he said, Ken, I've been teaching leadership for years. I think I'm better than anybody. And they want me to write a textbook, but writing isn't my great skill area. But I've been looking for a good writer like you. He'd read my papers in his class because I had to take it for credit. He said, would you co-author it for me? And I said, well, we ought to be a great team. You can't write and I'm not supposed to. Let's do it. But then when I met Spencer, I thought, God, isn't it going to be fun to write children's books rather than this textbook stuff?
Well, Ken is easy to work with, as a co-author. I lovingly tease him, I call him Captain Optimism because he's just super optimistic, super, open to your ideas. He really doesn't have a ton of ego, so he's a learner at heart. And so it's very easy to work with Ken.
Ken, is that a learned optimism or natural optimism?
I think I got it from my father. My father was an interesting guy. He grew up at West Point. His father was a doctor in Highland Falls at the gate of West Point. When he got out of high school, that's where he wanted to go. His father said, "No, son, you should go away to school." He said, "Well, if I can't go to West Point, I'll go to Annapolis." And he graduated from the Naval Academy in 24, but they didn't need naval officers in 24 because World War I had just ended in 22. And so they released him after his senior cruise, and he went to Harvard Business School and majored in finance. And in 1940, he came home and said to my mother, "Well, I quit today." She said, "You did what?" He said, "Yeah, I quit." She said, "Well, why?" He said, "Hitler's crazy and the Japanese are going to be in this." He said, "I need to help out." So he takes from a vice president to a second Louis, and they put him in Brooklyn Navy Yard. And Pearl Harbor happens. Looks like he's going to stay there, because he's, 40 years old with no experience. That wasn't my dad's style. So one of his classmates that stayed in was in Washington in the Navy. And he called him and said, "John, what do you got for an old fart in the action? I got to get in the action." He said, "Ted, let me look into it." And he called him back a few days. Said, "Unfortunately, Ted, the only thing I have for a guy like you is a suicide group going into the Marshall Islands." And so they upped him a rank or two and gave him a bunch of LCI, landing craft infantry. And his job was to protect the Marines and the frogmen coming into Saipan, Kwajalein, Weetak, Tinian, and the Marshall Islands. And so my dad was always wanted to help and was positive about things. And so when I was in seventh grade, I won the presidency of seventh grade. It was a predominantly Jewish school, and I was chosen the Goy of the month and all that. And so I came home and said, "Dad, I'm the president of the class." And he said, "Now that you're president, your leadership training is going to begin. As leader, it's not about you, it's about we. It's about people." He said, "People think in the military it's my way or the highway." He said, "That's a myth. Sure, in battle, somebody's got to call the shots. But if you act like you're a big deal in peacetime, your men will shoot you before the enemy." And he started really teaching me about leadership.
Wow. Did your dad make it through the war?
Yes, he did. And then ended up retiring as a rear admiral. Pretty amazing guy.
Randy, what was the easiest and the hardest part of writing these books with Ken?
Well, I would say the easiest was Ken and I were both operating from areas of strength, things that we're both passionate about and like to share with other people. So that was really easy. The hardest part was although I said Ken is easy to work with, the hardest part was getting used to the way that Ken writes. Ken, more speaks a book than he writes a book, and so as he mentioned, he'll record stuff into a tape recorder, and one of his assistants, Renee or Martha, will, type out the script. And I'm just the opposite. I've got to sort of think about it, ruminate on the topic and kind of get my thoughts down on paper. And so we would have working sessions where we would talk about, the different topics that we're writing about, and Ken would be verbally processing. And I could only do that so much. And I'd say, okay, I need to, have some time to just sort of get my thoughts down on paper. But it actually ended up being a great symbiotic process, and it turned out wonderful. So it's just been one of the highlights of my career is to work with Ken on these two books that we've done.
No kidding.
Randy's been about the best co-author I've had in a long time. We have a lot of fun, and we divided this thing up beautifully with 26 on servant leadership, which is my area of biggest interest, and 26 on trust. So it was fun.
You had the dual expertise. Ken, I remember when the 1 Minute Manager came out and it revolutionized. I mean, everybody talked about it for years and years and years and years. Describe what you were doing before the 1 Minute Manager, and then what made that book hit.
Well, it's really interesting is that I met Spencer Johnson at this cocktail party. My wife introduced him to me, and as I said, he was a children's book writer and wrote these books with his wife on value tales for kids, and we started to talk, and he was working on a 1-minute scolding with a psychiatrist on how to discipline kids. And so I invited him to a seminar I was doing the next day, and he laughed and came running up at the end. He said, "Forget parenting, let's do the 1 Minute Manager." And since he was a children's book writer and I'm a storyteller, we thought we'd write a parable. And we had, 3 secrets. I had focused on goal setting and praising and catching people doing things right. And he had the scolding down, which we changed to the 1-minute reprimand. And we just ended up writing a parable. And it was interesting. We were invited on the Today Show on Labor Day, 1982. And because it was unusual to have a parable for leaders in this kind of book, and people were interested in it. And the next week, it went on the New York Times bestseller list and stayed on for 2 or 3 years. And so it still sells today. In fact, we redid it. We have the new 1-Minute Manager. The big change is we changed 1-minute reprimand to 1-minute redirects, because it's more of a collaborative style. But so I end up being a storyteller and a parable writer, which I really have enjoyed tremendously, because I don't like to write really big, long books. And so Randy said my book is fairly long, but it's made up of, 52 little books.
Yeah, there you go. And I think, Carey, you asked what really made the 1-Minute Manager hit,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a combination of those things. One, it was probably, if not the first, one of the first parable type leadership books, right? For the business world. Number 2, it was short, but yet the price was like, it was a dichotomy. It was short and sweet, but the price was like the price of a regular book. And it was positioned as like this gem, and it just took off, as Ken said. The Today Show helped propel that. I mean, Ken and Spencer actually self-published it before it got picked up by a big publisher in New York. And
I didn't know that. Really? You self-published it?
Well, initially, when we met in the first part of November. We had a draft of the book by time we were heading up to Winnebagos to the Rose Bowl, and we had a copy to give to everybody to read on the way up and back, and people just loved it. And I said to Spencer, "Well, let's go to New York and get a contract." He said, "No," he said, "they'll beat us up and take all the money because they don't know who we are. Let's build a record, so let's self-publish it." And so we ended up self-publishing the book, and we sold 20,000 copies with no advertising, basically through a group called the Young Presidents Organization.
Oh, yeah, YPO.
You have to become president of the company before you're 40 years old and have at least 50 people and $5 million in sales. And I did some sessions for them, and they really loved what I did. And they said, what are you going to do at the end of the year? Because I was on a 1-year sabbatical leave to do the 3rd edition of Hershey's in my textbook. And he said, "We're going back to the university." I said, "No, you're not." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're going to start your own company." I said, how are we going to do that? My wife and I don't even know how to spell the word entrepreneur. How are we going to be one? And they said, we'll help you. And 5 of these presidents volunteered to be our advisory board. One from San Diego, one from Illinois, one from Pennsylvania, one from Mexico City, and and helped us build a company from scratch, basically through IPOers. And so when the 1 Minute Manager was available, it was all these YPOers that bought all the copies and all. So then when we went to New York, we had something. We had a track record, could get a good contract.
Mm-hmm. And
That's a fascinating story.
now you have people like Patrick Lencioni or John Gordon, that it's a common thing, right? To write leadership parables now.
Those are two wonderful guys that I've kind of mentored. They've been friends and colleagues. I met Lencioni when he was 24 years old. I was at a session he was doing. And I came up to him afterwards. I said, Pat, what fabulous stuff that is. I said, you know where all that's from? He said, where's that? I said, it's in the Bible. He said, really? And so he's a good Catholic, and he now has realized that because I realized that when the 1 Minute Manager came out, an old friend of mine, Phil Hodges, who I met, us going to orientation camp at Cornell, called me and said, let's take a walk on the beach. And he was a very spiritual guy. He said, Ken, why do you think this 1 Minute Manager is so successful? I said, I don't know how. Somehow God must be involved. He said, oh, thank God. And after I mentioned God, then I get a call, would I be willing to meet with Norman Vincent Peale, and would I be willing to meet the Bob Buford who started Halftime, and so it just turned out that suddenly we were off in running with that, all with kind of a spiritual base, and I've since then started a ministry called Lead Like Jesus. It's all over the world. That's not connected to our company because we wanted to keep it separate, but it's amazing. Everybody around the world loves Jesus. They just don't like Christians.
Yeah.
And so I was on a radio show recently. They said, we understand you're very spiritual. What's your faith? And I said, I'm a follower of Jesus. I said, oh, you're a Christian? I said, no, I'm not. And neither was Jesus. A lot of people don't know Christianity is never mentioned in the 4 Gospels. And it's mentioned a few times in Acts, and it's negative, those damn Christians. I don't think Jesus came to start a religion. He came to build relationships around love.
I got a lot of places I could go, when it comes to the parable, and yours is more like almost, I want to say, a leadership devotional, 52 different short, very easily digestible chapters. So I've gotten to know Pat Lencioni over the years, and, I said to him in one of our meetings, I enjoy the parables, but I always go to the back of the book where he outlined the strategy, because that's how I think. And he goes, you're 1 in 100. He says, everybody reads the parable, nobody reads the back of the book. But I say that to say this. Do you think, and this is sort of a softball, but take it where you want. Do you think a lot of us overcomplicate leadership, that we make it too long? I'm always telling preachers, go shorter, not longer. Go simpler, not more complicated. What's your thoughts about the role of simplicity and brevity?
Yes, absolutely. I like to say leadership is a complex field, but it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Mm-hmm. There are many parts and pieces in the world of leadership, but you're right, Carey. I think we get in our way so much. We try to overcomplicate it. And that's what we wanted to do with the simple truths, was remind people common sense principles, right? And that's the subtitle on our book, Making Common Sense Common Practice. These are common sense things, right? That you probably learned throughout your life in some form or fashion. And if we can just keep those at the forefront of our minds, treat people, the way they want to be treated, the way that we want to be treated, remember these simple things, that gets us a big bang for our buck. So completely agree with you. And Ken is the master of simple truths, starting with the 1 Minute Manager. And throughout all of his writings, it really is about, let's keep things simple. Wouldn't you say, Ken?
Yeah, well, that's what I always felt. I said, I just don't have a very complicated mind, And when I looked at a lot of these leadership theory books and everything, my God, they just were so complicated and so research based and all that kind of thing. And so that was really fun when I initially got together with Paul Hersey to start, developing situational leadership. And we did that before the 1 Minute Manager came out, and then Paul and I decided to go different ways because in terms of the theory. So we have SL2, which is our form of situational leadership, but it's really saying that you need different strokes for different folks, but you also, and this is really powerful, you need different strokes for the same folks on different parts of their job, and that there's no one best leadership style to use with one person or one. You have to look at the task and ask, what is their competence to do this task and what is their commitment? And we start off with enthusiastic beginners, very sometimes where people are excited to learn something, but they don't have any skills yet. They need direction. And then they get a little disillusioned because it's more complicated than they thought. So they need coaching. And if you can coach them through disillusionment, then they get to the point where they got the skills, but they still want somebody to support and encourage them until eventually you can delegate to them because they're a peak performer. And so we developed these 4 development levels and with the leadership styles going through them, and it really made a lot of sense. And so our whole company's, I think, don't you think, Randy, is built on simple truth theories, and I think that's why we've done so well. We're like 30 or 40 nations, we got 300 people around the world working with us.
Yeah, it's simple is better. And it's not to, demean any other type of approach, with the typical business book approach. And all of our teachings are grounded in research. But, it's like, Carey, you go to any conference, you read any big business book, right? What do you remember? You remember the 2 or 3 key nuggets, right? Those little phrases, the little concepts that point you to a bigger message, right? But that's why we create these models, is because they allow us to practically work with these bigger truths, right? These bigger concepts, and it puts it in a more tangible, practical package that we can actually use day to day to improve our performance.
So I want to look back, over inflection points, because the success you guys have both experienced has been remarkable. Randy, you've been around for 30 years, so you can definitely speak into this. Ken, you've been around for the whole journey. But when you look back, what are 1 or 2 key decisions or turning points that you had, decisions that you made that really were inflection points for your organization? I don't know who wants to go first, but I'd love to know 1 or 2, like, wow, I'm so glad we did that. That made a way bigger impact than we thought.
Well, I think the big thing, and Randy can build on this too, is we've mentioned it. My wife Margie and I, when we started the company, she was president. She's much better at that kind of thing. I'm the chief spiritual officer. I'm a cheerleader, and all. But is that we had a philosophy about leadership about we rather than me. We were anti the hierarchy because we have been at universities, where everybody's sucking up the hierarchy and all that kind of thing. And that just didn't make any sense. And when we decided to start our own company, we certainly didn't want any of that. And we were hiring bright, capable people. And we wanted to use their brains as much as ours. So we'd say, we have things to share, but what do you think? And so it wasn't sort of, we lay down the law and this is the way we're going to do it. How do we do it together?
So that was a turning point for you. We, not me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Randy, what are one or two strategic moves, decisions, moments that were inflection points in your view?
Well, personally or professionally or both or either or?
Yeah. Well, when you think about the trajectory of the company or your own career, what do you see?
Well, a personal one was prior to joining Blanchard, all in the same week, my wife gave birth to our second child.
Wow.
I graduated from college with my bachelor's degree. I had dropped out and went back as an adult, and I got laid off from my job. All three big events in the same week. And as I started my job search, I ran across this opening at Blanchard. And I'm like, that name Blanchard rings a bell. Where was it? And lo and behold, as I interviewed and ended up getting, a job at Blanchard, I realized it was from my management class. Ken's textbook, Management of Organizational Behavior, right? Was one of my textbooks. And I remember reading about situational leadership. And I was saying to myself, wow, this makes sense to me. This is the kind of leader I want to be. It's what I believe about leadership. And I remember looking in the footnote at the bottom of the page, it says, Ken Blanchard, Escondido, California. And I'm like, oh, wow, this guy lives right here in my town. I didn't even know that. So that life experience was an inflection point for me that set me off on a different direction in my career. And then I think corporately, Blanchard has chosen to really focus on what we call the heart of the house. And that's all those managers, in the heart of the house, in the middle layers. Yeah, we do work with executive leaders. That's part of what we do. And we do work with frontline supervisors. We do that too. But the heart of the house, all those managers in between, those are the people, those are the foot soldiers of every organization, right? They're the ones that impact the day-to-day life of all the people in the organization. And we've chosen over the years to stay focused in that area. And I think it's really made a huge impact. That's where we're most effective. That's our sweet spot.
I'd love to know why you made that decision, because a lot of organizations would be saying, "Oh, we got to get to the C-suite. We got to get to CEOs and VPs, et cetera." But you're like, no, middle management is actually the heart of our company. Why that focus and decision?
Well, Ken can chime in. I would say we don't do it to the exclusion of those other audiences, because we do quite a lot of work with those other audiences. And it's not an either or, it's an and, it's a both.
Okay.
But
you haven't excluded them either, which a lot of companies would do. They would go for the higher ticket, right?
Exactly. And the simple truths that Ken and all of his other co-authors that we've been, preaching over the years resonates with that heart of the house. And the research shows that when you look at vital, healthy organizations, the executive leadership has indirect correlations to that, because they're looking at the big picture, the strategies, the vision, the mission, right? The operational leadership, they've got the hands-on, day-to-day, right? They're implementing all the day-to-day leader behaviors, all the issues around justice and fairness and, performance management. And that's a sweet spot for us. And so that's where you can really get some traction in developing the leadership culture that you want and need in an organization.
And one of the interesting things, Carey, is that we get asked a lot of times, how can I influence the top managers? Because they don't seem to get it, and what we really say is that you need to first develop a relationship with them. A lot of times people will go to top managers and say, you're not doing this, all that kind of thing, and they'll throw you out of the office. But if you develop a relationship with them, find out something that they're interested in, that you're interested in, and then you could say, here's something that we're trying in our department. I wonder what you think about it. And does it have any application in the total organization? And so you develop relationships up the hierarchy rather than win-lose relationships. It's how do we create a win-win thing? And so it's collegial stuff.
Ken, one of the things that I remember most, this could be a talk from what is now the Global Leadership Summit years ago, back when it was whatever, the Willow Creek Summit or whatever. But I remember you talking about seagull management, and you kind of read my mail. Can you, for leaders who may not be familiar with that concept, talk about what seagull management is?
Well, that's the typical top-down organization where the top managers think they have all the brains, and then when they wander around, what they do is they focus on what's wrong rather than what's right. And we call them seagull managers. They fly in, make a lot of noise, crap on everybody, and then fly out. And they wonder why people are leaving and aren't really committed. And so no, it's how do you work with your people and not seagull in, and see, because what happens when you seagull in, then you get a bunch of ducks. We love to talk about that. They go quack quack. It's our job. Quack, and so you got seagulls running and ducks going, and the place is a noisy place, but it's not producing what you really want. Where you want people to say, this is the place to be. And this is what we want to. This is where we want to work.
That is the power of a simple metaphor, though. As soon as you said, this is most managers, you're not there very often. You swoop in, crap all over people and leave, seagull management. I'm like, anybody can understand that. It's so powerful. It captures exactly how a lot of leaders lead. And this is a leadership podcast. What is the key? Because you have a bunch of them in your servant leadership, Randy, and your stuff on trust. What is the key to developing short, memorable metaphors, statements, pithy phrases that simple but profound? I mean, it's not a nursery rhyme. It's deeply profound because it's like, no, that's exactly how it works. You can say it in 10 seconds. How do you develop things that are that simple but carry actual weight?
Wow. Well, that's top secret, Carey.
There's the IP, right? We're gonna have to stop recording.
Yeah, we could tell you, but then we'd have to,
Yeah, that would be the end of me. Mm-hmm.
No, I don't have a great answer for you, Carey. It's I think it's a couple of things. One is, I think, knowing your audience, right? Like what will resonate with them.
Yeah.
Number two, looking at your own personal experience. For me, like when I'm writing and trying to communicate concepts to people, I often think first in headlines, like article headlines or titles.
That's helpful.
And if I can sort of come up with that, then I can start to sort of formulate the message, whatever that looks like, whether it's, an actual article, some metaphors. That's how it works for me. I don't know. What about you, Ken? Do you?
Yeah. Do you actually remember how you came up with seagull management?
Oh, I don't know. Some of that stuff in my sleep, maybe, but I think the big thing that I enjoy, Carey, now more than anything is that the big problem with self-serving leaders is their ego. And I've started a 12-step Egos Anonymous because it's the biggest addiction in the business world.
Wow.
And there's two forms of ego. One is false pride. When you come from a more than philosophy, you think you're brighter than people and all. And the other is fear or self-doubt, where you have less than positive feelings about yourself. A lot of people say, how is that an ego? It's, you're focused on yourself. And so what we try to do, we have a number of managers that they have their weekly meeting with their people, and they started off with an Egos Anonymous meeting where you got to stand up one by one and say, hi, I'm Ken. and everybody says, hi, Ken, and I'm an egomaniac. And you have to talk about sometime that week when you think your ego might have gotten in your way, either with false pride or self. And if we always say, if you can't think of an example, then you probably lie about other things too. The ego comes up periodically, and it's something you have to really work on and laugh about and all that kind of thing. Because if we're going to do a we culture, not me, we have to get our egos out of the way.
That's so good. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about that. So, you have so many competing ideas, but there's a life theme. Randy, yours is about trust. Ken, yours is about servant leadership. And it's funny, talk about memorable metaphors. I don't know whether it originates with you, but I think the first time I heard it, again, at a big public leadership conference, was from you, Ken, probably in the 90s. Ego stands for edging God out, right? Is that original to you, or did you pick that up somewhere else? Or
I don't know where that came.
It's so widely quoted now, but you were the first one I heard it from.
I'll take
And-
it.
Yeah, might as well, right? Might as well. Nobody else is claiming it. Randy?
Have you ever heard about the rules of attribution?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the first time you say something when you're giving a talk, you say, well, Ken Blanchard has said, blah, 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 whatever it is, right? The second time you use a piece of material, you say, it's been said. Blah. And the third time you use it, I've always said.
Yeah, I think preachers do that a lot.
Right? Third time it becomes yours.
I'm a bit of a footnoter. I love to give credit where credit is due. But, that's great. So, how did you center on trust, Randy? Why did that become like your specialty? How did you, because I think, I'll tell you the reason I'm asking the question. A lot of young leaders, we all remember the day when the internet was nothing, or, it was dial up and information was scarce. And, you kind of pick a lane and you go with it. And now literally the world's your oyster. Everything's at your fingertips. I can be an quote expert on 72 different disciplines. And I think actually finding a focus is harder. But I would also argue, we had Near AL on this podcast years ago and others. It's also Cal Newport. It's a superpower. If you can focus, if you can say, I'm going to look at a variety of things, but I'm going to focus on trust, or I'm going to build my leadership around servant leadership, right? The two expertises we have in the room now. First of all, agree or disagree, that's a competitive advantage. And then secondly, how did you pick what you picked?
Yeah, I agree with you that it's a competitive advantage. And trust for me was born out of life experiences that taught me the value of trust in relationships, and particularly difficult experiences when that trust was violated and had to have it rebuilt. And trust had, because of those life experiences, trust had been one of my core values.
So is there a personal story under that you feel comfortable sharing?
There is a personal story. I won't share the details, but I would say in my marriage with my wife, we've been married 38 years this year.
Congrats.
Thank you. We experienced a breach of trust and between us. And it was, it was a moment where things could have went south, right? And we called it quits, or we could have doubled down on what we knew we had and what God had in store for us. And so thankfully we chose that route, and we worked through it, and our relationship is so much more stronger than it ever was.
She works at the company too.
Yeah, my wife works at
Oh, wow. Wow.
the family affair at Blanchard, literally, right? We have and so trust had been, just central to one of my core values. And years ago, our company acquired a piece of content from a former Blanchard consultant who had developed a model around building trust, and she was retiring, and we acquired the content, and we needed someone to sort of be a product champion and represent it. And I raised my hand, and through a series of events, I became that person. And it just talk about, those, I think there's a movie called Sliding Doors that's
I haven't seen that. Yeah.
uses a metaphor of like, a door slides open and you step through. And if you had not stepped through, your life would have been different, right? Different choice. And so I stepped through that door, and it set me off on this trajectory of becoming a subject matter expert in trust, doing a lot of research, a lot of writing, working with clients in the field. And so I think for those who really become experts, whatever definition you want to qualify as an expert, I think there's often an intense personal connection to what it is, right, that they champion. And I know it's similar with Ken and his focus on servant leadership.
Yeah, Ken, life focus. Good idea, bad idea for young leaders? And then tell us about servant leadership.
Well, I think getting some focus on where your skills are, where your values are, if you really do something you care about, you never have to work a day in your life, and so that's really important. I got interested in servant leadership because I really found that people didn't understand what it was all about. They were thinking it was about the inmates running the prison or trying to please everybody or some religious movement. And they didn't understand there's actually two parts of servant leadership. One comes from the traditional hierarchy. That's vision, values, direction and goals. Leadership's about going somewhere. And that's the responsibility of the hierarchy. It doesn't mean you don't involve other people in getting there. But if people aren't clear on what they're being asked to do and what good behavior looks like, shame on you, because that's your responsibility. And once the vision, direction, and values and all are clear, now you go to the servant part of servant leadership and you turn the pyramid upside down. And now you work for your people. And your job is to help them win, is to do what? Live according to the vision and the values and accomplish the goals that are in their particular area. And when you look at it that way, boy, that's really a powerful thing, and so the ultimate, when we get your egos out of the way, I always talk about what did Jesus do? He got down and he washed the feet of his disciples. He was trying to demonstrate to them, just as I have done for you, do for others. The ultimate in servant leadership is you really eventually work for them, but it's got to be clear. And he came down with a clear message and a set of values and direction, and then here we got to get you to use it.
Yeah, I guess, Ken, retirement isn't a concept for you, is it? You're still going?
I wrote a book called Refire. Don't retire, make the rest of your life the best of your life, with Mort Chavis, who had headed up the psych department at University of San Diego. We talk about 4 areas of refiring. First of all, what are you doing intellectually to stimulate your mind? Secondly, what are you doing physically? Okay. What are you doing spiritually? And finally, what are you doing emotionally with relationships and all? And take a look at that. And, here I'm going to be, end of this week, I'm going to be 85. And people say, you don't seem like you're ready to retire. No, I'm continuing to refire because I'm really excited about different kinds of things and trying to find things that we can do and excited. That's why it's been fun to work with Randy. And now I'm working on a book with my son, Scott, who's the president of our company now. And it's called It's Always the Leader. If things are going well, it's the leader. If things are going lousy, it's the leader. And that's what he's learned from me and what I've learned from him. And so that's really kind of exciting to do that. They said, another book at this time, it's not another book. It's just another opportunity to learn from another person, and to, 1+1 is a lot greater than two.
What are you doing at almost 85 or soon 85 to keep you agile in those four areas? Obviously, you're writing, so that's intellectual. You're speaking, you're doing podcast interviews, you're still teaching your life's work. What are you doing physically, emotionally, and spiritually to refire?
Physically, I have an exercise coach that works with me 3 times a week, and I have an recumbent bike, and I walk the dog, and things like that. And then, spiritually, I have Lead Like Jesus, and all the work that we've done in that area. And then emotionally, I'm a relationship guy. I love Zoom because now I don't have to travel. But I think of somebody I can Zoom them and see how they're doing and what's happening with them. And so it really is kind of fun. I love to Zoom around the world.
Ken, Ken is being very modest when he says he's a relationship guy. I mean, Ken literally has lifelong friends from grade school, from junior high, high school, college that he stays in regular contact with. It's not the, once every 4 or 5 years get in touch with someone. It's like regular occurrences. I just admire him so much for the way he's continued to nurture relationships because people are important to him.
On Sunday, we're having a 85th birthday party that my wife and daughter are organizing, and it's going to be about 110 of my closest friends there. And it's just going to be fun because I really, really love people. That's for sure.
I've been studying a little bit. I mean, studying might be an exaggeration, but paying attention to what keeps people engaged, alive, and vibrant, beyond 70, 80 years old. And I think that's an excellent recipe. And relationships and new experiences and contributing, I think, is a huge part of it. Randy, I mean, from another angle, Ken's probably got a few decades on you, but you've been at the same company for 28 years. That doesn't happen very often. So what have been some of the keys to longevity within the same organization over multiple decades for you?
Yeah. Well, I think of several things. One is I really identify with our mission, leaders powered for good, helping the workplace be a better place. People have better days at work. And so it just really resonates with me. The people I work with are just tremendous. It's the relationships, the people I get to work with. Some of my closest friends in life are those people that I work with, that I form relationships with. And I think the ability to grow and to do different things. Blanchard is a unique place in that it's not a huge organization. We just have 300 people. But it's one of those organizations that if you put in the effort and express interest in certain areas, many, many leaders are willing to give you a chance, and say, go for it, let's see if this works. And so, I've just been so blessed that over 28 years, I've been able to do different things, take on different roles, and feel valued and appreciated. So I think that's, it's not common these days to stay in one place, right? I mean,
No, it's not.
All the messages you hear out there are, oh, you should be changing jobs every 3 to 5 years, right? To move up and make more money and, position yourself and build your portfolio and your resume and all this stuff. And that may work for some people. And it's not an either or. And there's a lot of benefits to knowing what you like and sticking with it.
You'll be fascinated. My wife is teaching a career planning course now internally at our company.
Mm-hmm.
And she's done tons of them. And about 80% of them all have since she started doing it, have new different roles in the company because she helped them find out what their strengths are and how they can look for opportunities that maybe they can even be more helpful. And so you think, my God, career planning, all these people are going to leave the company. No, they're all looking for opportunities to be their best within the company.
A really cool experience around that is Margie is Ken's wife. She's really the brains of the operation. Ken will admit that, she's fantastic. He married above himself. We've
been married 63 years.
Hey, congratulations. And that's a great move to marry above yourself. I'm familiar with that move. That's a good one.
Probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years into my career with Blanchard, I went through Margie's class, this career exploration class. And one of the activities she has you do is write down your perfect day, right? Write out your perfect day. Be very specific, right? Like what time you get up in the morning, what are you doing, what are you seeing, what are you feeling, and write out your perfect day. And a few years back, it literally just dawned on me. I was like, wow, I'm living a whole lot of my perfect day that I wrote down in that, getting to work with clients and helping them build trust and improve leadership in their organization. I'm getting to write. I'm getting to speak. I'm getting to, coach people. And it's just amazing that, I won't say I had some miracle plan in place, this grand strategic plan that helped me get there. But just having that ability to be someplace that allows you to keep moving forward. Because like you said, Carey, it's as we get older, it's like learning new experiences, right? Continuing to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be big, grand things, right? But it's just little steps forward. And before you know it, you're living out your dream day.
So I want to play a bit of a lightning round as we wind down, because your book is called Simple Truths of Leadership. It's a playbook, 52 lessons, as we talked about. I want to pick a couple of my favorites that I want you to just explain quickly. And Ken, you've already talked about one, which is when you reissued the 1 Minute Manager, you switched from the 1 minute reprimand to redirect. So when people are off track, don't reprimand them, redirect them. Can you unpack that? What's involved with that?
Yeah, what it means is that when you're wandering around, you first want to see what you can catch people doing things right and give them a hand. And if there's an area that they're not doing quite as well, say, I noticed that performance isn't going quite as well here as we had hoped. What could I do to help? And redirect your efforts so that you can really feel good about that area too. And redirection is just a way of saying, how can I help you get back onto path or help you improve and get going in a better direction?
Randy, I'm guessing this one's yours. Fear is the enemy of trust. There are, to be honest with you, a lot of leaders who don't mind if they're a little bit feared. It's like, that's all right. It's you quake when I come in the office, not visibly, but like, that's all right. What's the problem with that?
Well, the problem is that it thwarts people's risk-taking, their initiative, their sense of safety in an organization. It really points to the bigger concept of psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
Like, can I speak up or offer an idea without fear of retribution or being put down or criticized? And it all comes back to this idea that trust requires risk, right? If there's no risk involved, there's no need to trust. And trust is predicated on risk. And if people are afraid of taking risks, stepping out, extending trust to people or being trusted, it's not going to happen. So it really prevents trust from even getting started.
So I've got a slightly different spin, and it's not exactly fear, but I can think of a situation where there's a couple of leaders in the organization, senior, who one team member said she just holds in awe of them, like so much respect, but in a positive way, not like I'm scared when they come in the room. But her comment was, I worry that sometimes I don't say what's on my mind because I hold them in such high regard. I think, oh, they probably got this figured out. What do you do if you have that kind of dynamic on a team? Any insights or analysis of that?
Yeah. Well, to me, Carey, it points to something that's really become evident to me, and that is making the implicit explicit. We have so many unspoken expectations or assumptions, right, in our relationships, and the tremendous value of making those explicit. And you talk about trust. Imagine if that person said to his or her leader, I have this idea. The story I'm telling myself is that it's not really okay for me to disagree with you because I don't want you to think less of me because I respect you so much. Just opening that conversation allows people to align on expectations, right? So
that's helpful. Really helpful. All right. I don't know who wrote this one because it's co-author. And I hope I got this right. There's nothing so unequal as the equal treatment of unequals. Can I say that one more time? There's nothing so unequal as the equal treatment of unequals. What does that mean?
That really gets to the whole concept of SL2, our situational approach to effective leadership, is that if you're using the same leadership style with everybody, it's going to work in some situations, not for others, and it just doesn't make any sense. So that's why you have to take a look at who you're dealing with and what do they need from you and what do you need from them.
Yeah. It also applies to the topic of fairness, in the world of trust. I think any of your listeners, and I'll ask you to play along with me on this, Carey. So I'm going to make I'll say a statement and you fill in the end for me. Okay. Yeah. I'm being fair because I treat everyone the
same,
right? Most leaders have said that at some time or another. And that's actually one of the most unfair things we can do, right? Is to broad brush everyone with the same treatment instead of looking at unique circumstances and treating people equitably and ethically. Two key words, right? Equitably and ethically. And so that's what we're getting at with that statement. We're not sure the source of it. Lots of places say Aristotle said that statement. Others, Anonymous, that brilliant person Anonymous who gets some.
Yeah, that's right. Quote him a lot.
Yeah. But the idea of you have to treat people individually, whether it's in leadership styles like Ken was mentioning, right? Or in issues of fairness.
All right. I got one more if you have time for it, which is the most important part of leadership is what happens when you're not there.
Yeah, that's a really important one because what you really want to get with your people is the point of, as Randy's saying, is trust and a relationship with them where when you're not around, they want to perform just as well as when you're there. And so a lot of times when you really build people up and make them a part of the team and all, boy, when you're not around, they really want to even be better than they could be if you were watching.
Mm-hmm. How do you get that?
Wow. I think that's the secret sauce of leadership, right? It's taking all these common sense principles and, our 52 are not the sum of the universe, right? Those are ones that we've chosen to focus on.
Most of the universe, though.
Right? Yeah, it's most
of the universe. Fair enough.
Yeah, Ken's right. There might be 54, 55 out there. We gave you 52, but I think it's the day-to-day behaviors, right? It's the day-to-day behaviors. How do you show up day in and day out so that you're creating that environment that people know they're trusted? You're using a variety of leadership styles to develop their competence and commitment so that they're all peak performers at what they do. And in a sense, in the biggest, grandest sort of metaphysical sense, a leader's job is really to kind of work our way out of a job, right? To develop other leaders, to develop our people to be self-sufficient. And if leaders can do that, then they're doing the right thing.
Well, this has been an absolute treat to spend time with both of you. Is there a final word from each of you? Anything we didn't cover that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Well, I'd like you to understand that I'm pretty lucky having a partner like Randy. It's been great to work with him, and that just remember is that none of us is as smart as all of us. And and gather people around you who can bring out the best in you, and you can bring out the best in them.
Yep. I'll just say amen to that. No way to top what Ken Blanchard, really one of the most brilliant and legendary minds in the world of leadership, has just said right there.
Wow. Well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. Latest book is called Simple Truths of Leadership. It's a playbook, and it's available everywhere, along with 70 or so other books that you've written, Ken. Pretty easy to find. Do you have a top 2 or 3? If somebody was to start a Ken Blanchard library, obviously this one, let's take this one off the shelf. What are 2 or other 3 books that you've written out of 70-ish that you would say, start here or definitely put this on your shelf?
Well, the 1 Minute Manager and is it also Raving Fans, which I did with Sheldon Bowles from Canada. Customer service, that's really been a really important one. And leading at a higher level really brings together all the things that we have. And I think this, Randy, 25 co-authors or more?
Yeah, more.
That contributed to that in our content, because I really love to learn from other people, and I don't want people to think when I come in the room, I think all the brains have arrived. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, what I'm picking up from this conversation, and I knew you had co-authors, but it's the power of collaboration. If you look at most songs these days, it's an artist and then in brackets featuring some other artist. And I think a lot of leaders are still living by a solo playbook. It's like, no, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. But look at what you can accomplish when you surround yourself with bright, wonderful people. So congratulations on all the collaboration and on a career well-led and well-lived so far.
Thank you, Carey.
It's been fun, and I've really been blessed.
Yeah.
And so Randy's one of them, and I've got a chance to work with Conley Barrett, who took over president of Southwest when Herb stepped down. I mean, just so many interesting people, to say the least.
Yeah. Website where we can find all things Blanchard these days. Where would you direct people?
Yeah, you can go to Blanchard.com, learn everything that there is to know about Blanchard, the organization, and how we work with our clients to help develop their leadership capacity. SimpleTruthsOfLeadership.com if you want specific info about either of our books. Those are 2 great places. And in all sincerity, anyone listening, please reach out to Ken and I on LinkedIn. We would love to connect with you and keep the conversation going.
That's fantastic. I want to thank you both so much.
Well, good to be with you. You're the best. You're a great interviewer.
Oh, thanks. Well, as you were joking, I just kept sending you questions. You're like, all right, how many more questions are you going to send? But thank you. It's been a real treat to be with you both today.
Thank you, Carey.